And welcome to another episode of Primility Primer, our morning reminder of the power of balancing pride and humility as we go about our daily lives. This is episode number 48. I am your host, Jared Morris, and it is Thursday, which means that it is time for another edition of Thank You Thursday, our weekly time to stop, step back, and announce what we're grateful for. And typically, when I do these Primility Primers, I have at least one live audience member, and it is my dog Rebel, who sits over here in his bed, laying comfortably in his blankets, listening to me, listening to me doing these episodes, which he is doing right now. And I need to tell you a little story about Rebel to set the stage for the thank you note that I just wrote and that I will read to you here in just a few minutes. So Rebel just celebrated his 11th birthday, but he has had enough near-death experiences that we're all kind of shocked that he's made it here. He's eaten rat poison, had to be rushed to the hospital. He had to have an experimental surgery performed to remove his gallbladder that had never been performed on a dog that small. And there was the time way back when he was a puppy. He was probably 5 or 6 months old. And I was walking him, and he was on one of those little retractable leashes. And we were living in an apartment at the time in Florida, and we lived on the 3rd floor. Well, he was so small at that time, he couldn't go up the stairs by himself. So we would always take the elevator up and down. And actually, earlier in that day, I had been using the elevator and noticed that it was stopped on our floor and just open. Wasn't going up and down. It was just stopped. It was open. Kind of walked inside, noticed that there was a little switch, kind of like the emergency switch that you can flip that holds the elevator. I'd never seen that before. Didn't really kind of know what it was, but just kind of took mental note of it and thought, okay, and then walked down the stairs because, the maintenance crew must have some reason to keep the elevator there. So later on in the day, I'm walking Rebel, and we went on our normal walk, and we got back on the elevator to go up. And so as I reached down to hit the number on the floor, I looked away, and as the door started to close, Rebel darts out. So the elevator door closes. Rebel is on the other side of the elevator door as the elevator starts going up. Now, you can imagine my terror in that moment, unable to do anything to stop the elevator. I'm, frantically pressing buttons, doing whatever I can. But again, the elevator is going up. Rebel is on the other side of it. Only then the retractable leash is kind of giving slack. And I feel like I panicked terribly in that moment. I certainly felt panicked. And yet a lot happened in the next few seconds because I flipped. Well, the first thing I did is I dropped the leash because I figured I better give it as much slack as humanly possible. And then I saw that little button that I had seen earlier in the day that I had never noticed before, flipped the button, and it brought the elevator to a stop on the 2nd floor. And so the elevator door opens, and I am freaking out thinking, because obviously I'm thinking that, the elevator went up, poor little Rebel, his little 6-7 pound body. At that time, he's 7 pounds now. At that time, I don't even think he weighed that much. Was just going to be pinned up against the corner of the elevator. And so I sprint down the stairs, and there's Rebel being held by our neighbor, just looking around without a care in the world, as if nothing scary or frightening or terrifying had just happened. Meanwhile, my heart is beating a million miles a minute. I'm already broken out into a sweat, and I am freaking out. And it turns out that this guy, my neighbor, he was coming home from work, had just, was walking up and kind of saw everything unfold and sprinted over, grabbed Rebel before the elevator was up so far that there was no more slack on the leash, which would, again, have pinned Rebel up against the corner of the elevator shaft, and had grabbed him, had the presence of mind to remove his leash, and is just holding him and had protected the little guy from certain doom. And, again, Rebel just celebrated his 11th birthday. And actually, last night before I went to bed, I was kind of laying there with the little guy and was just thinking about some of the things that we've been through together, and thinking about how close I was to losing him that early on. And every time I think back to that moment, I just get that same kind of feeling of terror all over again, imagining, I don't actually think about the worst case scenario, but you start thinking about that story and you get up to the worst case scenario, and then I stop thinking about it. And instead I just feel incredible gratitude to this man who, and I never really got to know him. I didn't live at that place that long. Our schedules never really seemed to pass by. But we will always have that moment. And so I sat down today, and I don't know him. I don't know how to get a thank you card to him, although I've thought about sending one to him so often. And so I'm using my gratitude journal here, and I wrote one in there. And so here's the thank you note that I wrote to him. Dear friendly Florida neighbor with the incredibly clutch elevator arrival timing. Thank you for being Rebel's guardian angel here on Earth during that terrifying day 10 years ago. Rebel is laying peacefully in his bed right now as I write this, a few weeks past his 11th birthday. If you hadn't been there that day and had the presence of mind to scoop Rebel up and remove his leash, he might not have even made it to his first birthday. In the decades since, a lot has changed in my life. There has been one constant, Rebel. I cannot imagine these last 10 years without him, and I cannot imagine ever finding the right words to fully express the depth of gratitude I feel toward you. So in closing, I will simply say again, thank you. You were a hero that day. Rebel and I have never forgotten. Yeah, an incredible story, and again, just eternal gratitude to that man whose name I don't know, I can't recall, but whose memory and whose presence and whose contribution to my life really can't be overstated simply for what he did in that one moment. It's interesting, I've got this gratitude journal. I told you a friend of mine last Christmas got me this gratitude box. It's got 52 thank you notes, so one for every week of the year, and then it has this little gratitude, a year of gratitude journal. It's got some pages where you can write down things that you're grateful for, and it's got some little quotes, and it's got some tips on writing thank you notes. And the quote that's here on the page adjacent to the one that I just wrote on says, "It is impossible to feel grateful and depressed in the same moment," which is a great quote. And I will simply close by saying, if anything's got you down, and if anything gets you down, a lot of times we want to just kind of sulk in that feeling. And certainly I think it's good to embrace even negative feelings. But one great antidote for that when we're ready to move past it is gratitude, is finding something to feel grateful for, and not just to feel it, but to act on it. And, writing a thank you note, even if you just write it for yourself, I feel so much better having written that. I would love to be able to give it to this guy, give it to the person who has earned the gratitude. But I tend to feel that just the act of writing it is a positive. It makes me feel a little bit better. And again, part of the idea with Thank You Thursday, with this focus on gratitude, is just to keep putting it out there in the world. And even just the act of doing this, writing it privately to myself, it still puts it out there in the world because it makes me feel better. It makes me feel more grateful, which will help me treat people better. And that just passes along that good feeling outward, and makes this world a better place for all of us. So anyway, gratitude, it's wonderful. It's scientifically proven to make you happier. So my question to you now, as I close this episode, is who are you going to write your thank you note to today or this weekend sometime? But I highly encourage you at some point, take a step back, sit down, write a thank you note, express your gratitude to someone, especially someone who has earned it. It'll make them feel better. It'll make you feel better. And with that, we close this episode. So stay cognizant of your pride and your humility. Go to primility.com/join. Get on the email list. You'll get our Monday morning email. You'll get our Friday roundup so that you can see all 5 episodes, see which ones maybe you missed and you want to catch up on. And I'll be back tomorrow with a brand new episode to close out the week. Respond.